Millions of Americans are asking how we can prevent further gun violence following the deadliest school shooting in nearly a decade. According to the Giffords Law Center, the U.S. leads high-income nations in gun violence, with more than 200 Americans shot and injured each day. Adam Skaggs is Chief Counsel and Policy Director for the Giffords Law Center. It's headed by former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, who survived an assassination attempt at another mass shooting in 2011. Welcome, Adam. A recent CBS News poll conducted before the Texas shooting found that more than half of Americans support stricter gun safety laws. Where is that momentum, though, at the federal level?
Well, it's not just more than half of Americans support. We have supermajorities of Americans who support things like requiring background checks before you can obtain a firearm. We've got supermajorities, and yet because of the filibuster in the Senate, we can't move this legislation through Congress. The House has passed a number of important bills requiring background checks on all gun sales, extending the time to complete background checks for the FBI, and yet the Senate has yet to take these up. It's a problem when a small percentage of, senators representing a small percentage of the U.S. population can stop what a supermajority of Americans want to accomplish and the types of gun reforms that they want to pass.
Yeah. I don't know if you heard a previous guest that I had, Linda, a mother who lost her son at the Parkland shooting, but she said that we shouldn't be calling it gun control. We should be calling it gun safety measures. And that, in fact, according to public policy polling, a majority of gun owners and a majority of NRA members actually support some of these common sense gun safety measures, including expanding background checks on all firearm sales. Tell us more about what you're finding in terms of when you're even seeing that NRA members and gun owners support this. How do we get to actually making any changes in favor of safety, not in favor of control?
Well, look, I mean, you're absolutely right. Across demographics, whether you're talking about Republicans, Democrats, Independents, polling on background checks, about 3/4 of NRA members support requiring background checks. And that's because the vast majority of gun owners who purchase guns go to a gun store and pass a background check. You know, it's a couple of minutes. It's a routine thing to do. So even gun owners who care about safety support that kind of a policy. Now, you're going to have different gun policies that poll differently, and some are more popular and some are a little more controversial. But we absolutely have vast majorities of Americans who want to bring common sense into our regulation of these deadly weapons and require that they are limited to be accessed by responsible people who aren't going to commit these sorts of horrific crimes that we're doing. You know, we have these structural problems passing legislation in Congress, and I'm not going to pretend that we don't and that it's going to be easy to get things through, but I am encouraged. The Senate has said that, come next month, they will bring votes on a couple of different pieces of legislation. I'm encouraged by that. But while Congress has its challenges, there's an opportunity to move gun policy at the state level, and that's been happening since the Sandy Hook shooting, which this horrible incident in Texas is unfortunately reminiscent of. We've seen about 500 strong gun laws passed in states around the country. So there is an opportunity and there is momentum to put into law some of the types of policies we're talking about. The problem is that there are a number of other states, Texas being one of them, where they're going in the opposite direction. You know, just last year, Governor Abbott in Texas, with the head of the NRA, Wayne LaPierre, sitting at his side, signed into law a law that says anybody who's 21 years of age can carry guns in public without any permit, without any training, without any proof that they know how to use the firearm safely, to operate the gun safely, much less have the judgment to ensure they don't make any terrible mistakes. Law enforcement in Texas urged that bill to be defeated. Law enforcement said this is going to put law enforcement at risk. It's going to put the public at risk. But the NRA said we want it, and Governor Abbott signed it into law. And unfortunately, when you have a state taking an approach like Texas, Texas gets an F on our scorecard of state strength of their laws. and they have a rate of gun death that's much higher than the national average. That's what we see when states take this approach of abandoning any kind of responsibility with their gun policy and their gun law. We see higher rates of homicide.
You know, Adam, I asked Nicole Skaggs, our reporter, about that very issue, and she said that the people of Texas didn't support that. The majority of people in Texas didn't support rolling back those safety measures. Do you think that responsible gun owners are the key to trying to push forward with things that are common sense?
Well, I think they are absolutely a key. I think we need gun owners who see the agenda, who see that rather than selling, weapons for sportsmanship and for hunting, we've now got an industry that's promoting things like body armor and helmets and the tactical gear that we've sadly seen involved just in the last 2 weeks in these things. So I do think responsible gun owners need to have their voices heard. They need to join this debate. And Giffords, my organization, is working with gun owners across the country, and we're going to ensure that their voices are heard. But I think it's critical. We need all Americans, gun owners and non-gun owners alike, independents, Republicans, and Democrats, to say enough is enough, and to say the time is now to move beyond some of this polarized political debate and find out what we agree on, because we do agree on a lot. Maybe we disagree on some things, but there's a lot we can agree on, and we need to come together, and we need to tell our elected representatives, we need you to do what the people want, not what the gun industry wants you to do. And unfortunately, there are too many of them in Congress and in places like the State House in Texas who don't care what the people want. They care about their own power, their own reelection, and they do the bidding of the gun lobby.
All right. Adam Skaggs, thank you for sharing your perspective.
Thanks for having me.